to order. Well, now I'll call it to order now that we're recording. And I guess first up is just the approval of the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. Any further questions or comments? Polls? No. All in favor of the agenda as presented indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, on to the comprehensive minutes. My goodness, there was I feel like every word was in there. The minutes from May 11th, as we discussed the budget. Any corrections on the minutes?
No, move approval.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. All in favor of approving the May 11th Finance Committee meeting minutes as presented indicate by saying aye.
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 Aye. All right, on to what looked to me like a fairly positive fiscal year 2022 final report. Jeff is filling in for Lynn today, so take it away.
Okay, great. Well, as I mentioned earlier, so again, Lynn's out on leave for much of this week, so I said that I would step up and kind of walk you through the report, the fiscal year 2022 final report. As Greg mentioned, there's a lot of good news in there. I will try to answer whatever questions I can, and obviously Dan and Debbie are here too, and they might be able to chime in. But then if there's questions that you have that I can't answer, I'll certainly get back to Lynn. She'll be back in the office tomorrow, and I could follow up with you on that. Let's see. So also just be thinking about, because we do have on the agenda for the board meeting a report out for the full board from the finance committee in terms of, so let's be thinking about what are the highlights that we would want to report to them on. And the way it's listed on the agenda is it's listed under the chair report. So Jim, I don't know if you want to hand it over to Greg to do that, but also let me just note that it's on the way Debbie did it on the agenda, the way we talked about is, so on the executive director update, it links to the full budget report. So I could also do it down at that part. So I don't know if you have preference of when during the full board we give the finance committee meeting update, but maybe we can chat at the end of this meeting, kind of figure out, well, what are the high points that we want to take to the full board, and then when do we want to do it?
Yeah, typically I have Greg do it up front, and then
Okay,
and then if there's questions, people have seen it in their packet. So
okay.
Everyone knows you should front load good news.
Exactly.
Yeah, right.
All right. So all right. So do folks, I'm assuming, have access to the documents, or should I share my screen? Hoping the former, because I'm juggling between monitors.
I've got it up, and I can also share it if Randy or anyone else needs it.
Okay. So again, I'm going to be looking
in front of me if possible. So if you could put it up there.
Yep.
Okay. Great. Thanks, Greg. So, and again, I've got a couple things up on my screen, and so the Zoom is hidden. So speak up if you have questions, because I'm going between a couple different things on my screens. All right, let me get to where I want to get to. All right, so what you see on the screen, so can everybody see the comparative summary of agency budget revenues and expenditures? So Lynn's typical expenditures or revenue and expenditures report.
I've got it zoomed in so we can kind of see just revenues, and then we can go to expenditures.
Okay, great. So of course, what you see there is if you've got the columns, the fiscal year 2021 for comparison, the approved fiscal year 2022, and then the actual year to date in the third column, and then the difference, and then there's some comparisons between the percentage of the budget between 2022 approved budget and then the fiscal year 2021 budget. So just to give you hopefully all the information that you need. So let me go to Lynn's notes here. So again, so in the revenue, find a breakdown of revenue by source of funds, fees, grants, assessments, penalties, and other, which is includes investment income, miscellaneous, and rents, and comparative information. So let's see, just some highlights from that. So our registration program came out slightly under budget due to we've got roughly 40 fewer sources than we had in 2021. So let's see, trying to look at the other things. I guess rather than, I mean, Lynn has a lot of detailed notes here, but I'm not sure how much of that is of interest. So maybe I'll just look to you. Are there things that are of particular interest or you would like me to highlight or you're wondering about? I guess one thing I'll say before, sorry about that, before turning it over to you, the penalties you probably noticed are particularly high. And that is, we've got one source, we had over $106,000 in penalties. And so that was really bumped that number much higher than it normally is. I mean, typically, I think I've seen the roughly 8 to 10 year average of penalties is roughly $80,000. So again, this year or in the last fiscal year, again, it was 217,000, so quite a bit higher. And again, with one source contributing over 100,000 of that.
Jeff, I see that even in 21, it was at almost $160,000. Is that a recent trend, or do you think it's just a couple outliers that were significant?
Well, I'm less familiar with it from the previous fiscal year, but I'd say in this current budget year in 2023, we are also going to see some very high numbers. We've got, frankly, 3 of our major sources we're having compliance issues with, and so the numbers will likely be high for at least through 2023. Again, we're doing everything we can to get them back into compliance. That is certainly our goal. So I'd say, but whether it's part of a larger trend, I'm not sure. I hope not, because again, we certainly want to be working with our sources to be within, in compliance of their permits. There were certainly, I mean, the source in the large source in 2022, partly because of supply chain issues, and I mean, so was a lot of disruption that we still might be seeing because of. And that's perhaps coming out with the penalties. Also, I know facilities, I mean, it's part of what I'm hearing is they're having a hard time hiring staff and getting the environmental managers on staff. And again, just a lot of turnover. But again, that's something I'm hearing, but that doesn't mean that they don't still need to operate within their permits.
Jeff,
permit conditions. Yep.
Is that number penalties collected or penalties assessed?
Penalties collected. That's a good question, but I believe it's collected.
Greg, we see your Outlook now, just so you know.
Oh, sorry. I don't know how it switched over. Let's see, go back to.
Can I go ahead and have somebody let me in? I'm switching over to my main computer. Thank you.
Okay, so any other, questions on the revenue side?
I guess there's 2 other lines that pop out at me, Jeff. One is, the good news that we did not need to go into the contingency draw that was budgeted. And I don't know if you could speak to that or if there's anything we should comment. And then the other, I think you told us last time, but was there a reason for the wood smoke reduction grant being so much lower? Are we still anticipating getting the rest of that grant?
Yes, we are anticipating spending that out. That is a 2-year grant. There were a variety of things, and Dan, certainly jump in if you have anything to add once I'm done. But essentially, I think those contracts, that grant took a while to get in place because of delays from the Department of Ecology, and then secondly, because of supply chain issues, there was just a lot of stock and backlog on the part of the installer. So not having the heat pumps, not having the furnaces, the wood stoves, the replacements. And then once they had the inventory, it was the installers. So, but now I think we're up to speed, and I mean, I'm certainly signing off on a lot of those. So I think we're fully expect that we will totally spend that. Again, it's a 2-year grant, so we've got time to spend it, but that's the reason why we got off to a slow start with it.
And is that reimbursements on those?
Yes, that is correct, isn't it, Dan?
Yeah, so that is basically we take 25% admin and promotion off of the grant, and the rest is just turned around and paid out to the citizens and the vendors. And as Jeff said, yeah, the big thing was we didn't get the contract signed until late October, which was already well into the heating season. So people are very reluctant to pull out their heating source when it's November. So we didn't really get a good jump on the program until March or so. We'd had some over the winter, but and then as Jeff said, there was a lot of supply chain issues and now still a lot of installer employment issues. So we've got business owners going out and doing field work that they hadn't done in the past 10 years. So but yeah, our grant total was actually less than we thought we'd be getting close to 300,000 from the state, and it's under 200,000 total. But we already see through fiscal year 22, we spent 58,000. I've already allocated 50,000 for fiscal year 23. So
Great. Any other questions on revenue?
I have one. Jeff, you said we reduced by 40 sources, and I don't remember hearing a up or down sources in a budget report before. So can you just say like a little bit, like, does that mean like gas stations closed or generators went away or people just didn't register and we need to follow up and see if they're actually active still or not?
I think it's, and actually let me ask Debbie to chime in. She's the one most familiar with the registered sources, and she sends out the billing and gets that money in. But I think it's probably a number of different things. I think it's, with the economy, I think a number of sources, smaller sources, have simply closed. But Debbie, do you have any particular thoughts on the dynamic there?
You are actually correct, Jeff. There are several different reasons and several different types of sources. There was lots of gas stations, but mostly just smaller sources. Just can't
Awesome.
make it. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. Cool. Thank you. And then, yeah, I just point out the same things you did, Greg, the contingency and the penalties, but also I always think it's good to highlight that the building is on budget because that's a lot of work for our staff, and Lynn does a great job there. So I think to me, that's another significant item in the income side.
Gotcha.
Great. And so Greg, I know you had mentioned the issue of money that we're putting back into the general fund. So let me come back to that once we've talked about expenditures, and then can look at the revenue minus expenditures. So again, yep, Greg has the expenditures on there now. Greg, you might need to make it a little bit bigger. You could.
Bigger?
Can folks read that? So actually, if you could scroll back up to the revenue part, let me just point out again that the box that Lynn has on the right is pretty helpful. I think it just gives a very quick summary of, again, where do our revenues come from in terms of the balance between fees, penalties, grants, and so on. I use that information a lot just in talking about ORCAA and where does our funding come from.
I agree. It's very helpful. Back down.
Yep. All right. So of course, just some highlights. Of course, payroll is the vast majority of our agency's costs, about 88%. And we were slightly over budget there. We did have some turnover in staff, but also we had the payout of the former executive director. So that, I think, is what made that slightly over budget. But again, it was close enough, and we did not need to do a budget amendment on that. Let's see. are there any questions? I mean, again, I could go through the highlights that Lynn left for me, or maybe I'll just ask if you have any particular questions or things that kind of jump out at you that you're wondering about.
Questions? I mean, I guess I was wondering just on training and conferences, is that a COVID leftover, or are we getting folks training?
Yeah, I mean, so yes, we are doing a lot of training. I mean, again, because of COVID, I mean, a lot of training has gone online. And so, for instance, we just, bring in 2 compliance staff up to speed. Most of their training so far has been online. They will be attending some asbestos training. Actually, I will be, it looks like, traveling to DC in next month for the National Association of Clean Air Agency meeting. So I think you'll see travel kind of pick up, but I'd say so that is a COVID leftover. Actually, Odell last month, she went to Pittsburgh for the National Monitoring Conference. So slowly but surely, we are doing more travel, and presumably, I mean, also related to that, I know is the board travel expenses. And so again, with all of these meetings virtual, we haven't spent any of that, but if we do start having folks come back in here to ORCAA for the meetings, then we might start spending more of that.
And can you speak to the office building principal and interest? Forgot what we did on that. Did we pay it off?
So we're scheduled to pay, we'll be paying it off in December, I think, is our final payment of, I think, about $44,000. And so, yes, so then the building will be all paid off. And actually we were talking about, so what sort of celebration do we need to have to mark that occasion? Because that's pretty exciting.
How do you burn a deed with no emissions?
Induction stove.
Yeah.
Maybe we compost it.
Yeah, there you go. Can I ask one, Greg?
Of course.
Did the copier break?
Yes, so we did have to replace a copier back earlier in the spring. It was like 12. It was 12 years or so old. I mean, it was old. We looked at maintenance. We looked hard at should we lease versus buy, but at the end of the day, we just decided, given that we decided to purchase a new copier. So we've got a copier. We purchased a new color copier.
Okay, cool. Yeah, that's what's going to be my next question. So one thought, would be that, you technically could draw from the equipment reserve for that copier and then add a little bit more into the general fund, but that's your call. I think it's de minimis, really. So,
okay.
But yeah, this looks good to me overall. I don't have any other questions.
I guess I just want to confirm the computer hardware software. That's like the replacement that you've been talking about, replacing old computers, getting more people on laptops.
Yes, exactly. So again, when I stepped in, there was just a lot of old computers. I think there were like 2 of us, maybe 3 of us that had laptops, and the laptops were all very old. So yes, so we've ordered in the past couple months, we've ordered now 6 laptops. So getting those distributed to folks. And so yes, that's exactly what that is. And also purchasing the Owl for our conference room for the hybrid meetings. So that's what's in there.
I guess I still don't understand why the principal interest on the office building was so much lower than anticipated, if we hadn't quite paid it off yet.
Let's see. Which line are you?
Oh, under total non-PR, 2/3 of the way down, under the first solid line, 2 above utilities in a gray line. There's principal / interest office building. If you look at the screen, I've got it.
Okay, all right, I see. Yeah, thanks for the cursor. I know that there was that we got billed by the county for debt service on the building 6 months before we expected, and I don't know if that's related.
That's it. Yeah, because they refinanced without our permission or our ability to influence it, and the payment came early.
Gotcha. Okay.
So we didn't pay one in the fiscal year last year.
Gotcha. That makes sense. Okay,
Yeah, so you can see that reflected in the previous year being double budget.
totally. All right, Randy, any questions? Did we lose Randy? Oh, no.
Nope, still there.
Sorry, limited screening.
Just was muted. No questions.
Great.
Okay, well then again from so similarly to and the revenue, the little box on the side that represents where our revenue comes from. The little box on the right here just shows where our expenses go in the breakdown. And as I mentioned, 88% of it's for payroll. So again, that's kind of a helpful little sidebar, side box. So
Now,
total.
can I ask one more just related question to the building, Greg?
Of course.
Where are we at on getting the bids for the roof and the solar? Did she get very far on that?
There was a bid. So I know she talked to a couple different solar providers last summer. So we've got something, but we have not moved forward on that. The roof is still has a few years left on it, and so it doesn't make. And just with everything else going on, I have not moved that forward. I mean, I agree that we should, and again, we've got a great south-facing roof with lots of surface that at some point is going to be a good will be good for solar, but it's a matter of capacity and just not having the capacity to prioritize moving that forward at this point.
That makes perfect sense. Well, and I think at this point too, since the last conversation, I've seen Puget Sound Energy doing a whole bunch of grant programs for public buildings and even
Right.
small ones. And so
Yeah.
I just like to get out of that, paying that bill. And I mean,
Yes.
my gut is it's not even more than 2 or 3 years of total Puget Sound Energy bill. Like we'd pay it off pretty easily. So.
Right. Yeah, no, I think there's going to be more and more incentives and grant programs available, whether it's through commerce. And so I agree. And it's definitely something that's on my radar and Lynn's radar as well. It's just, yeah, it hasn't risen to the top in terms of moving forward on it.
And just slightly related, when she's been replacing HVACs as they need it, do you know if she's been putting in heat pumps?
We're in need of looking at, so she has been talking to Puget Sound about our HVACs, about our HVAC system, because we do have some units that are, some air conditioning units that are, and actually I'm not sure if they're heat pumps or they're just AC units, but that are, I think they're just AC units that are pretty old. So we've got, so we're working to put together an RFP for the HVAC system for the building. So that is something that we're kind of looking at in conjunction. The system is at this point still working fine, but it is kind of past its useful life. So that is something that we're looking at as well.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I think we can talk about this in a few months. I don't want to intrude on the workload right now, but I was thinking about it just a little bit the other day, how it would be interesting for us to almost put out a pro forma on electrifying our building and use it as an example for the community, like how we paid for it and what it looked like over the long term. Obviously we won't do it immediately if it doesn't pencil, but to me, I think we have an educational opportunity here too. So
right.
Thank you.
Yeah. On that note too, there's a lot of grant money out for car chargers as well, EV chargers, and that would make very good curb appeal in front of ORCAA to have a car charger.
Absolutely. No, that's something that is also on my radar and looking and thinking about, again, grant and money available to do that. And how do we start electrifying our fleet? We are going to be adding a new vehicle here soon. And so we were budgeted to replace a vehicle last year. We did not. And so definitely want to do that this year. Is it time? Of course, a lot goes into thinking about that in terms of what's the usual, what's the range on an EV? Do we go with the full EV? Do we go with the plug-in hybrid? Given the range that we need and the infrastructure that we have. So yes, that's also certainly would like to move in that direction as well.
Cool. Yeah. Look forward to that conversation. But we don't have to have it here.
Well, and maybe that's like a specific strategic plan item where we really like when we do that process, we really dig in and look at the whole picture at once. I mean, that would be a good time to do that without messing with day-to-day operations as much.
Yeah.
Just a thought.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that, again, that's kind of why I'm anxious to have the capacity to get into our strategic planning discussion so that we can, be more strategic about our thinking, and so how to prioritize some of these things. So yeah, I
Awesome.
agree.
Sounds good. Should we talk summary a little bit, or did I cut you off before you were done, Jeff?
No, I think that's, let me look again, looking at my notes here. So I think, so total expenditures, yeah, so then we can, I think, so at the bottom of the page, you can see that there's a total. So looking at the revenue minus the expenditures leaves a balance of almost $178,000. So that, yeah, so there you go. Well, actually, look up at the bottom of the bottom of the first page is where I was looking. So yep, there you go. So the net surplus to the general fund of $177,797. Again, a big part of that was the penalties, the extra penalties that we got. Also, we did not, the agency did not move forward on some relatively large expenses that were budgeted, like a new vehicle. But again, I'm working with the team here to make sure that we're moving forward on those things this year.
Great.
So, okay, so now I think, yeah, scroll down. So the fund balance. And so the fund balance shows the beginning balance as of July 1 at the beginning of the fiscal year, and then at the end of the fiscal year. And then the things that were allocated, the contingency funds that have been set aside for particular purposes, and then the unrestricted fund balance.
Right.
Can you remind us does the Title V just get refilled at the beginning of the year? Is that why it ends up, it was because we were overspending it and we recalibrated it this year, is that right?
Yes, so it will, yeah, it'll be moved back into the general fund, or yes, from Title V into the general fund, and our Title V fees were increased this year to, again, there's a pretty complicated workload analysis that goes along with the Title V work, or with setting the Title V fees, but the fees went up a fair amount because of needing to cover the extra spending in fiscal year 2022. So again, state, we're required to fully fund that program as part of that's part of the federal and state regulations on that.
Cool.
Great. Any questions on fund balance?
Good position.
Yeah, for sure. I mean,
Yeah.
good to, as we go into, an inflationary year, right? It's going to be, yeah, I'm glad to have a healthy fund balance.
Yes, no, I'm very glad as well. And again, very glad, I know, yeah, to be in, I think ORCAA is in a really strong position. We've got, again, some funds. There's some important investments that we need to be making, and I think we are making those. Again, talked a little bit about the computers that we're purchasing. Again, we're doing this, we've got money in this budget for the salary survey, and that I think is actually going to be a little bit more expensive than we had budgeted, but I think we've got the funds to do that. Again, we'll purchase a vehicle. So I feel that I think the agency's in a really good position.
Great. I guess my plan would just be to kind of walk through the high points on this. I could even share the screen. I know that everyone got this in their packet too, and just walk through it. And I invite anyone to interject if I neglect or misrepresent anything.
Cool.
Great. That sounds good.
All right, I'm going to stop sharing. Go back to the agenda here. Well, anything else for the good of the order?
Let me just add, so I think we're scheduled for a finance committee meeting in October to go over first quarter of 2023 spending.
Great. Okay, we'll plan on a 9 a.m. meeting on the 12th. That sounds good. Okay.
Cool. And you're planning the building payoff party? Maybe we should do that as like an in-person something after the first of the year.
Yeah, no, I think that sounds great.
Like previous directors and board members, like do it almost like a kind of mini reunion for people, previous staff.
Sure. Yeah, we can start giving that some thought, thinking about how that might work. Of course, yeah, of course in January the weather won't be very good. It might almost be better. I mean, we could wait till next spring when the weather's nicer and have something, more of a building thing out in the parking lot and a spilling out and tours of the building and all of that. But yeah, we'll give that some thought to how we would want to appropriately celebrate the milestone.
Dad, who's barbecuing?
I'll barbecue. I'll smoke meat for it.
Oh,
yeah.
All right.
So here, the other question I have is,
Make sure to capture that in the notes, Debbie.
Yeah, right.
I'm not sure if it's a little too ironic or on the nose.
Well, and one of the questions I have related to that is maybe, I don't remember when we had a anniversary recently. And so if we have an even or an odd or a 10 or a 5 year next year, you know, if there's any alignment to that, it'd be kind of cool to just turn it into a year-long celebration. And you know,
I think it might be 55 years because
toot our horn,
from 68 to 23.
Yeah. So that's perfect. Like we have a 55 anniversary year, and even do like
building payoff.
A building payoff and a special logo for the year, Dan. Like it could be fun.
Yeah.
A whole, a bunch of us going out and doing extra public engagement. I don't know.
Yep.
Cool.
Hey, Jim, wanted to let you know I'm not going to be at the board meeting for the first half hour. The 350 Seattle case is being argued at 10 o'clock.
Oh.
So yeah, I think it would be appropriate, assuming that you guys are going to go for more than half an hour on the budget and whatnot, to add an executive session. I'll fill everybody in on how the argument went and what the court's disposition might be.
Okay, so I'll let folks know at the beginning that we will have an executive session. Okay,
great.
Sounds good.
Well, Godspeed, Jeff.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not going there. Deborah Cohen from Foster Garvey is doing the argument on behalf of Puget Sound. So they incurred the expense this time.
All right.
All right, great. Well, we'll see everyone back here, same place. I think I'll just turn off my screen, but the finance committee is adjourned, and we'll see you guys at 10 o'clock.
All right.
All right. Thanks,
everyone.
Greg. See y'all.